But I'm not abdicating the importance of inflation. There is another aspect of that.
Just quickly, sorry.
Yes, we were looking at 3 scenarios, and the scenarios produced by the Treasurer. And the scenarios indicated that the lower the wage rise, the higher the growth, the lower the rate of inflation, and the higher employment. And I felt we must support the lowest wage rise for the sake of the unemployed.
Sir Keith Campbell, thank you for talking to us this morning.
Thank you, Steve.
Back to you, Sue.
Thank you very much, Steve. Steve, of course, is at the Lake.
With Eric Waters. Good morning. The Economic Summit continues in Canberra with major employer groups coming out in favour of a centralised wage fixation system. However, there have been industry warnings that if such a system is adopted, it must be the only source of increases in wages. This morning, there was less enthusiasm for the system where wage rises are pegged to the consumer price index.
Delegates arrived at Parliament House this morning amid conflicting reports of a split in employer ranks. The talk was that the independents were at odds with the Confederation of Australian Industry, the peak employer group, over the question of a return to a centralised wage-fixing system and whether such a system should be based on indexation. This morning, employers downplayed the reports of disharmony, claiming instead there was a general agreement on the problems facing the country and how best to tackle them. Sir Keith Campbell of the Hawke Corporation said the meeting was a chance for the various groups to get together for the first time since arriving in Canberra. He said the meeting was called simply to discuss today's proceedings and to decide on speakers.
The main issue was really about the agenda and who might like to speak today.
Sir Keith wouldn't be drawn on the employer's attitude to wage indexation. He said the main point to be established was exactly what type of centralised system is being sought by the ACTU. Confederation of Australian Industry spokesman George Politis echoed Sir Keith's comments that the meeting was called to discuss the agenda. On the question of wage indexation, he had this to say.
Well, indexation, I think, has often been said by our group, is if you mean by that the automatic adjustment of wages for prices without any examination and without any regard to the national economy, that's not a very sensible way to go about it.
New South Wales Premier Neville Wran arrived for this morning's session, obviously happy about reports that employers had come around to the ACTU initiative.
I think, in real terms, the employers came a long way last night because previously there'd been no acceptance of the concept of a centralised wage-fixing system at all. And it's always been the case, in my memory, that the principles to be applied by the Conciliation and Arbitration Commission have been debated before that commission when the national wage case comes before it. So what's been achieved is quite remarkable.
Inside the conference, the wage question dominated proceedings from the very start. The first speaker, John Dixon of the Metal Trades Industry Association, said his organisation believed that the wage pause should continue at least until December the 31st.
As to the future system of wage fixation, we accept the desirability of a return to a centralised system, and we further agree that it is within the framework of conciliation and arbitration that the central system must operate.
This afternoon, the summit will move into its next stage, described as the strategy for recovery. The crucial questions still to be settled are when the wage pause will end and what form the new wage-fixing system will take. It now seems obvious that the delegates from all sides are agreed on a central system, but the question still to be settled is the way in which future wage rises will be determined. Quentin Fogarty, Canberra.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sir Keith Campbell. Focus.
Prime Minister, State Premiers, distinguished guests and delegates. Thank you, Prime Minister, for the opportunity of being present at this summit. I congratulate you on its conception, and you are aware I wish it astonishing success. In the last 48 hours, this summit and the community which is observing its progress have had the benefit of certain comprehensive and unprecedentedly frank documents on the state of and the prospects for the Australian economy. Those documents record that our inflation rate is double that of our trading partners, that our growth is negative, that our interest rates are non-affordable for certain sections of the community, and that all profitability measures are at historically low levels. For an intrinsically rich country, we are indeed in a sick and sorry economic state. And one of the worst manifestations of that state is unemployment of over 700,000 people, with more to come. There are, of course, other unsatisfactory elements, and these would certainly include the continuing parlous state of our current account, our vastly reduced fiscal options, and our overall non-competitiveness. Neither you, sir, nor I, nor this summit believe that the recent devaluation of the Australian dollar will do more than temporarily patch up some of these adverse elements. The forthright expositions by the Treasurer and the representatives of the ACTU clearly demonstrate that they understand the state of the nation and the need for discipline and sacrifice whilst one seeks to achieve sustainable growth. Both the Treasurer and the ACTU also reject any strategy that suggests that one can temporarily tolerate higher unemployment in order to first fight inflation. Let me inform you, sir, and let me inform the summit that I and many other Australian businessmen are also disenchanted with any such strategy. We would agree that the government's economic approach should now be based on a strategy to fight unemployment and inflation simultaneously. The economic and social implications of our unemployment are devastating. Clearly, it must be the top priority of this summit. The Treasurer tabled in his expose 3 economic scenarios. He correctly warned us of the deficiency in econometric models and asked us to concentrate on the broad messages. The broad but very clear messages were: the longer the wage pause and the lower the wage adjustments, the lower the rate of inflation, the higher the rate of growth, and the lower the rate of unemployment. For the jobless, and I would suggest for the whole economy, scenario C offers the most hope. But it still predicts its deficiencies accepted, an unemployment rate on average in 1985-6, little different to that in 1982-3. Surely that is not good enough. If we genuinely care about the jobless and we generally wish to incur discipline and sacrifice, we need to put together a scenario D. Unless the broad messages from the scenarios are meaningless, we must clearly extend the wage pause to the end of 1983. We should clearly agree that there should be no catch-up at that date, and we should further agree to review, on behalf of the employed and the unemployed, this vital community matter during the first quarter of 1984, having regard for our then progress and circumstances. It is very much appreciated that this action alone will not eliminate the need for other job creation initiatives. The ACTU makes it clear that other groups must share the same responsibility as the wage and salary earners. One must concur with that, but it is easier said than done. I believe, however, and many businessmen at this conference also believe, that corporations should be able, during the period of any wage pause, to correspondingly freeze the salaries of middle and senior management, the fees or other remunerations of directors, the fees of professional consultants engaged by those corporations, and any proposed increases in dividends. But with consideration in respect of this last item to anomalous positions which might have been created during the last 3 years. The vast number of corporations, their different ownerships, and other differing characteristics makes the dividend increase question vexed. But many of us are nevertheless of the view that the public corporations at least could and would respond to some formal moral suasion in the matter. Some of us also believe that a price surveillance authority would carry with it somewhat consistent contributing characteristics, but we would warn that should this take the form of a formal prices tribunal, it would, like its predecessor, be perverse in its effect. It would be remiss of me not to mention the budget implications of scenarios C or D, to which I earlier referred. In the initial year, the deficit would be higher, and its financing would be a challenge to monetary policy and a particular challenge to the level of interest rates. I believe interest rates could survive with some hiccup, as the relevant period will coincide with a low demand for private sector credit, and the package will command so much more confidence in the domestic and international financial markets. Confidence will be an important and beneficial offsetting influence. The upside benefits must surely be worth the challenge. You will no doubt take all steps, sir, to reasonably minimise the budget outlays. In my opinion, this should include the means testing of certain welfare-type payments. On the revenue side, you might consider the further imposition of expenditure taxes with non-regressive distribution in mind. And in that connection, I commend you to the OECD study of 7 countries completed in 1981. Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you, Sir Keith. The next speaker is Mr. Warren Adcock from the Confederation of Australian Industry.
One of the men responsible for the success of last week's economic summit has died suddenly in Sydney. 55-year-old Sir Keith Campbell, chairman of the Hawke Corporation and author of an important inquiry into Australia's financial system, collapsed after a heart attack. There have been tributes today from business and political leaders.
James Keith Campbell came to prominence in 1974 when he took over the reins of the giant Hawke Corporation, a Sydney-based housing and construction company. He was also on the board of a number of other housing and finance concerns. In 1980, he authored the Campbell Report on the Australian financial system, for which he was knighted. Sir Keith was a key speaker at the Economic Summit in Canberra, calling for moderation, not only on the part of the unions, but also by big business. Today, Prime Minister Bob Hawke paid this tribute.
I want to say 2 or 3 things about it. First, of course, how shocked I was to hear of Keith's death. Secondly, to convey to his family 2 things: our sympathy and our gratitude to them for the work which he's done for the people of Australia.
Sir Keith leaves a wife, Betty, and 4 children. Tom Bennett, National 9 News.
The Royal Tour.
Is it going in yet?
Yeah. So we're supposed to get it done yet?
We're told to be here at 10:30, so coming out of it.